Good afternoon and welcome to a new episode of Women's World. Today we're going to be talking a lot about the environment and how we need to address climate change. We have our in-studio guest today, but we're first going to start off, before introducing her, with a report about climate change and the effects of it, and how it's important to start reversing the effects of climate change very soon, by Nile TV's Sahar Talawi. Let's go take a look.
Just over a decade is all that remains to stop irreversible damage from climate change. Nearly all land areas are seeing more hot days and heat waves. 2020 was one of the hottest years on record. Higher temperatures increase heat-related illness and can make it more difficult to work and move around. Wildfires also start more easily and spread more rapidly when conditions are hotter. Changes in temperature cause changes in rainfall. This results in more severe and frequent storms. They cause flooding and landslides, destroying homes and communities and costing billions of pounds. Water is becoming scarcer in more regions. Droughts can stir destructive sand and dust storms that can move billions of tons of sand across the continents. Deserts are expanding, reducing land for growing food also. Many people now face the threat of not having enough water on a regular basis. Some climate change effects clockwise from top left. Wildfire caused by heat and dryness, bleached coral caused by ocean acidification, and heating, coastal flooding caused by storms and sea level rise, and environmental migration caused by desertification. Temperatures increases faster over the land and in northern latitudes. So for every 1 Celsius degree of global warming, temperatures in North America increase by almost 1.6 Celsius degree. Climate change has already contributed to land degradation through changes to average conditions and increases in extreme weather. Changes to average conditions include raised temperature and drier soils, increasing wildfire risk and impacting agriculture. Meanwhile, the weather extremes that have increased in frequency and intensity include heat waves, drought, and storms. The future impact of the climate change depends on how much nations reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to climate change. Policy decisions made in the next few decades by the world leaders will have profound impacts on the global climate, ecosystems and human societies, not just for this century, but for the next millennia, as near-term climate change policies significantly affect long-term climate change impacts. According to developments, events and political developments in Egypt during the past years and their impact on the implementation of renewable energy projects in particular, and since the strategies are flexible enough to keep up with the developments and events, has been modified the strategy of renewable energy to target 20% of the total energy produced in 2022. Egypt is one of the Sun Belt countries that enjoys the high solar radiation, so Egypt is one of the largest potentials of solar energy applications. The Egyptian Wind Atlas referred to the availability of promising areas with high wind speeds which qualify for the establishment of major projects to generate electricity from wind power.
Welcome back. We're joined in the studio by Mahal Khudari, a sustainability and management expert specialized in environment affairs. Good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Happy Valentine's to you.
Happy Valentine's to you.
Thank you. Firstly, can you start off by telling us about why is there an urgency to address climate change right now?
Well, as you can see that there are consequences to climate change. Yes, people might argue that there are differences in the patterns in the atmosphere and temperature throughout the eras that we've lived through, ice age, extreme temperatures. However, currently, the process and the speed in which there's change means that there is an urgency and that needs to change. Whether it's reducing fossil fuels, deforestation, all these have direct consequences such as losing homes, increased CO2 levels, also raising seawater temperatures. All these have dire effects on the economy, on the people, and so we really need to wake up.
So how did you see COP26? Was it, I mean, people who are environmental activists were not very happy.
Yes.
But a lot of people on the other side were happy with the changes that are happening.
Well, any government will try to prioritize
Growth.
exactly growth. What they don't realize is sometimes growth has an effect, a negative effect on the environment. We are increasing in our population numbers, which means we need to find resources to feed mouths, to feed the number of people that the earth can't sustain all this. So COP26 prioritized companies rather than the environment, so to say. But I'm looking forward to COP27, which will be hosted here in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh in November, hopefully. And I'm just really excited that it will highlight not just the MENA region, but the African continent, because it is a continent that contributes the least to environmental changes and CO2 emissions, but it will be hit the hardest because of the lack of infrastructure and resources that will deal with the consequences. So hopefully, although 26 wasn't as we hoped for, 27 will be.
Yeah, we hope so. Can you tell us a bit about the effects? You were saying that the African continent itself is going to bear the brunt of the environment change itself. What kind of effects should we or would be expected?
Well, with increasing temperatures come increasing water temperatures in the oceans. So for example, let me directly talk about Egypt. So we have a touristic destination of coral reefs, and that's a $36 billion industry per year, just tourism for that specific activity. With rising seawater temperatures, the coral reefs are dying, the marine life is dying, and it will have a turnover rate on the economy. So this is something that we have to really consider. Moreover, not just Egypt, but considering flooding and the source of the Nile, with the heavy rainfall now due to the climate change as well, there are consequences of flooding. Agriculture is going to die. Crops are no longer going to be at the standard of quality that's necessary to feed the people. And this will affect Egypt as well, with agriculture being one of the biggest sectors of employment here in Egypt, with around 60% employed in just this sector. So those are two very important things that we must consider. Another consequence is just hotter and hotter weather. And that's because the ozone layer is depleting with the substances that we're using, the CFCs that we are using, causing the sun rays to directly hit Earth.
But this is sort of like a circle effect, I suppose. As it gets hotter, we use ACs more because
exactly. So we need to find something to do, an approach to take to reduce this. Otherwise, the Earth is just going to keep absorbing the radiation from the sun, and the CO2 levels are increasing. So the greenhouse gas that is currently around our Earth is absorbing all this heat and throwing it back into Earth. So that's why it is a circular effect that we need to reverse by using other products that not necessarily have the CFCs. I can give you a very easy example. Deodorants. Most deodorants do have this product, but there are also natural deodorants that we can use. And that's just a tiny step in the right direction. Bear in mind that plastic is another huge problem.
We've seen recycling options here in Egypt recently that have
Yes, we've seen the machines that take in the water bottles, which is fantastic. We've not only seen just the recycling, but the renewable energy here in Egypt, for
And
example.
upcycling too as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have Muqattam, the garbage city
Yes.
that recycles the goods, and then they create materials such
Yes.
as bags, cards, paper, and it's all fantastic. And plus that is an initiative for women as well,
Yes.
being here in the women's world, employing women who have children who don't necessarily have an income. They take their children to nursery, and they're really providing for these women that not necessarily from a very strong background in education. And speaking of renewable energy, we see what the government is doing in Za'farana, for example, with the wind farms, as well as what's happening in Binban. And Egypt is trying to be the biggest solar-powered complex in Binban, which is very exciting. And around in 2060, I believe Egypt is aiming to use 42% of its energy from renewable energy. So it is fantastic news, and I'm very excited to be part of this recognition.
Which brings me to the next point. What kind of activities have you taken part in when it comes to conserving the environment?
Whoa, so I've lived a few years in the UK during my studies, and there they take it very seriously. What to do for environmental preservation. I've taken part in recycling at home, as well as recycling in the big scope, whether that meant going down and showing people what can be done. Also recognition. I was also working in schools with children, and this was a core part of the curriculum to talk about. I've also worked as a consultant for some companies, talking about how they can change their processes in order to make environmental sustainability a core practice. And so these are just a few things that I've done previously, and I would just love to add more. And that's why I'm here today, to talk about it and to highlight such an important topic that we must consider.
Have you noticed that, that the younger people are more interested in climate change than older generations?
That is for sure. I think it's just because we are more aware of the consequences. We are living the consequences. And certain studies do suggest that millennials won't actively participate in activities that cause harm to the environment, because they are aware of the consequences. You see many millennials now changing their dietary requirements, going from a meat-based diet to a more vegetarian, vegan option, just because they understand that the consumption of meat is not sustainable to our earth. The more that we breed cows and so forth, this results in more methane from their waste, and it's just unsustainable in the long run. And so because we are aware of what sustainability means, not just environmentally but economically and in terms of society, we are trying to make a change. And it's baby steps, because we're only one person, like if you're doing it for yourself, but hopefully it results in something much greater.
But do you think that there has to be bigger scale projects, not just me trying to, become a vegetarian or a vegan, and switching from, regular deodorants to natural-based deodorants, for instance?
For sure. I definitely agree that businesses have to take responsibility and have to change their products as well. It's not down to just one person. But we do see a few companies doing that. For example, Tesla, who is a pioneer in this industry, in the automotive industry, with regards to sustainable approaches with their electric cars and their modular systems, which is talking about the Internet of Things, where a 2014 car has the same specs as in terms of software as 2022, which means that the same system run, which means you can use that car for a much longer time. But electric cars also has a downside with regards to lithium batteries. The extraction of lithium requires gallons and gallons of water per ton of lithium. and it requires fresh water. So the extraction of water from the seas means that they have to remove the salt, which is then thrown back into the sea, and it's an imbalance, and again it affects the marine diversity. And so although we are taking the steps into the right direction, reversing what we've already done is very, very difficult.
But I've read several articles on the 1% and how they are probably as individuals responsible for environmental changes with private jets and huge mansions and all of that. Do you think if these people live relatively normal lives, even if they're very rich, would this actually affect the environment in some way or another?
Well, for sure, if you mean by living the normal life, taking
reducing their carbon footprint.
Yes, definitely. Taking commercial flights rather than private jets. That's a number one contributor to their carbon footprint for sure. But then you do have those people in the 1% that are investing their money, billions and billions, into renewable energies, helping the society. And number one is Bill Gates. He's invested so much in his charity, and then not only with the environment, but medicine and trying to eradicate certain diseases in certain areas of the world. So although they do contribute largely to their carbon to the world's carbon footprint, yes. They have also the power to reduce the effects by investing the money they have. So yeah, I agree with your statement.
China. That was a problem with COP26 when it came to the deal, because they didn't want to reduce their coal use. Do you think that in COP27 China might somehow change their approach slightly, even if it's not up to what the international countries generally want? But do you think that they will somehow find some sort of leniency when it comes to...
China is a very, very powerful country with one of the largest economies in the world. And they have the power to say no, and little influence can be done towards that. It's just a shame that they're prioritizing the short-term returns of investment rather than the long-term consequences. I do hope and pray that by COP27 that the effects of COVID and all that's been happening, and then the effect on their economy, just makes them realize that they're not just living for themselves. There are other countries out there that will have definitely consequences of their actions. So there's nothing that I can predict and set it in stone of what they will do. I just hope that they realize their actions will affect others. And yeah, we'll see what they have to say in COP27.
But the thing is, I mean, China is overtly opposed to it. But COP is actually pledge-based. It's not really set in stone. I can pledge to do this and that, and I don't do it.
Yeah.
A lot of, modern or developed countries are pledging a lot of big things. And we've seen this in the past. They don't really fulfill their pledges. Do you think that this is going to change?
There is extreme pressure from people now for governments to change. I think that will have the biggest consequence if they would want to change. And so governments are pledging. They've always been pledging for many, many years, and we see little changes. But because of the increased information that's out there for people to understand what's going on, I think they have no choice but to listen to what we have to say and take some changes into account. And also they really need to prioritize long-term consequences rather than just focusing on their short-term regime. I'm in office for this amount of years, I will do the best now, focusing on the income that I will bring in and not focusing on the long-term consequences. So I really hope that by COP27 that we become more aware. And especially, you're talking about developed countries. We are a developing country here in Egypt.
We're doing a lot compared to them.
Yeah, we are doing so much, and it makes me so proud. And the fact that we're hosting COP27 is already meaning that we are recognizing the problem, and we're trying to encourage change. And with everything that's happening in Egypt as well, with renewable energy, and not just renewable energy, but working on water management and ensuring that our water management ensures that there's no shortages, that there's no contamination, that the irrigation system is good and is working towards solving the problem of shortages. So it makes me very proud. And so hopefully this year we see some pledges that actually are seen through.
Hopefully, we hope so too. My last question for you, do you think that Egypt could set an example to other developing countries?
For sure. I mean, with what I'm seeing just by driving down the roads and seeing the infrastructure that we're building and the mass media that's going out there regarding what we're doing as a country, not just environment but social, with initiatives like Haya Karima and all these things that are happening, we should be looked up to, especially being a developing country with the minimum resources that we have and capabilities. I think it's a great time to be an Egyptian, and it's a great time to recognize our power and put our hands in one another to achieve the best for our people, for our earth. And I look forward to seeing what's next for us.
Okay, on that note, we're going to end the show. It's a positive note, hopefully, what's coming. It's going to be better. Maha Al-Khudari, a sustainability and management expert specialized in environment affairs. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. This brings us to the end of this episode of Women's World. Stay tuned for more on Nile TV.